what's happening is that Israel is still killing maybe 10 people a day instead of 100 people a day, but that's a lot of killing and shelling. Because Israel has not opened up the crossing points and basically the Rafah crossing points, because aggression is not just outright killing and destruction and bombing, but also preventing the entry of food and supplies and fuel and water and medicine, which is still ongoing. They haven't opened the Rafah crossing either. So if they think the ceasefire has been going well, I think maybe they need to reconsider. But the one thing we are all at least relatively grateful for is that the massive carnage and death and destruction has been diminished, so to speak. Although every human life, every Palestinian killed is a Palestinian lost and is irreplaceable. And the suffering is ongoing. So unless there is serious intervention to put an end to this constant assault, to this depravity of thinking you have the full right to kill and destroy and massacre at will, then Israel will continue, and it will continue in different ways. As we have seen, Netanyahu has succeeded in manipulating not just the discourse, but also reality on the ground. He has deceived and managed to manipulate Biden and is now trying to do the same with Trump.
But the Americans' role in this is key, even now, isn't it? We see the peace envoys there, we see the vice president there. He said yesterday Washington would not set a deadline for Hamas to disarm. That's because they understand this is a delicate process and they are determined not to see either side walk away, aren't they? They're determined not to see either side destroy this deal.
Yeah, the only thing is that Hamas has repeatedly stated that it is committed, that it is entering this in good faith, that it will commit, it will carry out its commitments and its obligations very faithfully, that it's trying. But the irony, and it's really a supreme irony, is that Israel is not allowing in the machinery, the heavy equipment that is needed in order to dig up not just the 10 or 15 dead Israeli soldiers, but as I said, the 10,000 Palestinians under the rubble. So Israel refuses to allow in all this machinery that is needed. Israel has been in control of that area and has really dug up all sorts of cemeteries and destroyed everything standing. And then they expect them to come up with the bodies instantly. So it's the Americans who looked at the ground, knew that this was a very flimsy excuse to continue the bombing and to refuse to enter, to open up the crossing points to allow food and medicines and water and supplies to come in. So you cannot tie the hands of a person and say, now, come out and do what I tell you. You have to be able to allow this heavy machinery. And Gaza did have it, but Israel bombed them earlier on. And then tell them dig up the remains of our soldiers. The Palestinians cannot say goodbye to their own people, to their own relatives. Whole families have been destroyed, and many are under the rubble still. So let's have some, again, reason and logic to this. You cannot prevent the entry of machinery and then tell them find the remains of our soldiers.
I'm very interested in the optimism, the gentle optimism, if I may describe it as that you feel about President Trump. I mean, do you have faith in him in a way that you didn't have in previous American leaders?
Trump's self-interest is that he wants to be seen as somebody who made peace. Now, he has misconceptions about peace. He thinks that this is a 3,000-year-old conflict, and we have to keep reminding him Israel was created in 1948, that it was Palestine all these years. Two, he thinks that this is a peace treaty and all the Arabs are. It's not a peace treaty. It's a very modest beginning. And it is not an investment in that you want to have resorts on the Mediterranean and Gaza. There are 2.2 million Palestinians in Gaza. There are 3 million Palestinians in the West Bank. We need to reconnect. We need to have the right to self-determination and to freedom. And as we speak, Israel is abducting and arresting Palestinians in the West Bank, stealing more land, the settlers are terrorizing everybody right now. They're carrying out pogroms in the West Bank, protected by the army and armed by people like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. So another form of assault and ethnic cleansing and violent occupation is taking place beneath the radar in the West Bank. So if you want to have a genuine solution, you deal with the causes.
Okay.
I cannot be naively optimistic, but I'm realistic in the sense that if the Arabs and if the other countries, the Western countries have now recognized Palestine, this recognition has to be translated into concrete action. Israel has to be held to account and has to be curbed and has to obey international. And if there are no consequences, it will not stop.
I mean,
so a whole bunch of requirements are there if you want to have a real new paradigm shift.
You talk about being realistic, and that realism means people on both sides giving up, giving in, compromising. When we last spoke to you, which is 2 years ago now, you laughed at the idea of Hamas being removed. Yet that is exactly part of this deal. Presumably, you don't laugh at that idea anymore.
How can you remove Hamas? I mean, who's Hamas? I told you last time, Hamas is not just a military group. Hamas has a political party, as I told you, has a women's organization, student organization, youth. Hamas has an ideology. And so if you want to kill them, I mean, they've already killed many of them. But they're within the political fabric, they're within the social fabric. So removed what? Removed from running Gaza? Hamas openly said they don't want to run Gaza, that they will accept a system of governance based on a national unity agreement of independent national professional figures. Some people call them the technocrats. So it is not a sort of political government. Now, there are all sorts of agreements. This has, to whom is Hamas going to surrender, if you will? To whom? To the Americans? To the Israelis? No. Hamas is, as I said, is a large part of Palestinian reality. We have our own disagreements. We have our own ideological and political disagreements, but they are not free game. They are not people that you can either kill or remove at will in order to satisfy Israel's requirements. Israel has in government people who were called and labeled and tried as terrorists, including Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. Israel is carrying out carnage. And
but it is part of the deal that Hamas have to essentially disappear. Are you suggesting that they are reinvented in a different form?
I'm sure Israel will, I'm sure Hamas will reinvent itself in many ways because it has to. This experience is a horrific experience. And it is of such tragic proportions that everybody has to draw conclusions as to where we move from here, where we go next. But to pick up Hamas and blame it and say disappear, it's not going to happen. You have to have mechanisms and ways of dealing with this, of carrying out a serious transformation within the Palestinian political system, which means a serious reform plan, which is homegrown and Palestinian, and serious elections in order to have our own democratic system of governance.
Looking forward to that notion of governance. In the news conference yesterday, the Vice President was also asked about future governance and said he didn't quite know how it would play out, that he was flexible. How do you see future governance operating in Gaza? Because that is critical, isn't it, to move this forward?
Well, future governance is not sort of appointing a new colonial mandate. Or bringing in the so-called board of peace and saying you're in charge, or bringing. I mean, Palestinians have agreed for some time now to have an international protection force sent maybe by the UN and so on, not to govern, but to help in this transition, to end the violence and to help in the restructuring and so on of Gaza. And to end the assaults on the West Bank as well. You cannot separate the West Bank from Gaza. So there are different ways, but the only real and workable way is to enable the Palestinians to run their own lives, to exercise their right to self-determination without having any kind of, white man's burden or a colonial intervention or an investment program and so on.
So I take it you're not keen on Tony Blair coming in to run things.
I think you're going to have a very hard time finding a single Palestinian, Arab, Muslim, or anybody who will have any confidence in, to be polite, in Tony Blair. We know where his interests lie. We know where his investments are. We know what he did before. It's not just the Iraq war and he's seen as a war criminal. That's also what he did when he was the quartet envoy, and the way in which people like that line their pockets using other people's misery. So we don't want that. And I'm being very polite.
What are the pinch points over the next few days and weeks?
I think, again, we have to be realistic. We have to look at what is possible, what can be done. It's very important if the crossing points are open, mainly the Rafah crossing point. The agreement talked about thousands of truckloads coming in, and they haven't been coming in at all. So that has to happen. The fact that you need heavy machinery and equipment in order to be able to start digging through the rubble and to start finding people and to prepare for reconstruction. You need to be able to have very simple things like the water working, because they don't have potable water. You need to be able to have fuel so that you can have also generators for hospitals and so on. You need to have medical equipment to deal with. We have the largest percentage of amputees, particularly among children and so on. So all these things that make life slightly possible have to be brought in immediately as per the agreement. And then we can talk about the formation of committees and so on. I've looked at the plan with all these committees and the stabilization force and the security force and all that stuff. Things can be simpler than that. And I think it can be done if the proper Palestinian engagement is there in order for the people to own the program of reconstruction leading to liberation, leading to statehood and self-determination.
And this is a ludicrous question to ask you to answer briefly, but I'm going to do that if I may. Is this the best opportunity for a two-state solution that we have ever seen, or is it too late?
It could go either way. I mean, look, people have been talking about two-state solution as a way of saying, I've done my duty. I recognize Palestine, I recognize the two-state solution. But you cannot allow Israel to continue to break down, to continue to destroy the two-state solution. They're annexing most of the West Bank. They're destroying all of Gaza. So what is the Palestinian state? And you have to understand that accepting a two-state solution means accepting boundaries and accepting the capital of Palestine and the people. Where are the boundaries? Doing that means Israel has to accept boundaries, and Israel has never accepted any boundaries, not just geographic and territorial boundaries, but any boundaries or limits on political and moral behavior. So this kind of let's say disengagement, but that has become a dirty word, this kind of separation based on recognition of boundaries, that Jerusalem is our capital, that our Palestinian people are everywhere, that the narrative of the refugees is real and has to be dealt with. These are the issues that would begin genuine resolution and genuine peace. But otherwise, you would end up with another truce, with another ceasefire. And if you keep in place all the issues, all the problems, all the impunity of Israel, all this horrific violence, then it's going to implode. So it depends on what we do. There is no self-propelling dynamic working here. It needs not just nourishment, but it needs a real determination to ensure that it might work. And taking into account, of course, all the core issues that we just discussed.
Hanan Ashrawi, thank you so much for talking to us today.
My pleasure, Jackie.